War is raging in Iran and on the US airwaves too. The media reporting it in different ways, something President Trump is always laser focused on.
But all we have really over here is the fake news.
Fake news.
They are the enemy of the people.
He's not a fan. He doesn't like the big free-to-air networks.
You're with who?
ABC News, sir.
Fake news. ABC fake news. One of the worst in the business.
But it's the cable channels with their looser restrictions.
Imagine waking up one morning and every single news channel in the world is showing the same thing. Not a hurricane, not a stock market crash, not even a terrorist attack. Something far worse. Two of the most powerful military forces on Earth, the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran, are no longer just threatening each other. They are at war. And the world, for exactly 48 hours, stood at the absolute edge of something we haven't seen since 1945. The edge of World War III. This is not speculation. This is not a movie. This is what happened. And in this video, I am going to take you, minute by minute, decision by decision, through the 48 hours that almost ended the world as we know it. Stay with me, because by the time this video ends, you will understand something most people on this planet still don't. We didn't just come close to World War III. We were one phone call away from it. To understand why these 48 hours were so dangerous, you need to understand something fundamental. The United States and Iran don't just dislike each other. They have hated each other at an institutional, governmental, deeply personal level for nearly half a century. And that hatred has never been just political. It's been ideological, religious. It runs through the DNA of both governments. Let's go back to 1979. Before that year, Iran was actually a close American ally. The Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was essentially a US-backed ruler. He was secular, pro-Western, and he made sure that Iran's massive oil resources stayed friendly to American interests. But in 1979, everything changed. The Iranian Revolution swept through the country like a wildfire. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a religious scholar who had been living in exile, returned to Iran and led a revolution that overthrew the Shah entirely. And from day one, this new Iran made one thing crystal clear. America was the enemy. Khomeini called the United States the Great Satan. Not a political opponent, not a rival, Satan himself. And then came the act that made everything personal. On November 4th, 1979, Iranian students stormed the US Embassy in Tehran and took 52 American diplomats and citizens hostage. They held them for 444 days. 444 days. Think about what that does to a country's psyche. Think about what that does to the relationship between two nations. The United States has never forgotten that moment, and Iran has never wanted America to forget it. From that point on, the relationship between Washington and Tehran became one long, dangerous game of threats, sanctions, proxy wars, and near misses. In the 1980s, the United States secretly supported Saddam Hussein's Iraq during the Iran-Iraq War, a war that killed over 1 million people. In 1988, a U.S. Navy ship called the USS Vincennes shot down Iran Air Flight 655, killing all 290 civilians on board. The United States said it was a mistake. Iran called it murder. Through the 1990s and 2000s, Iran built up its nuclear program. America demanded it stop. Iran refused. Sanctions were applied. Iran's economy suffered, but their nuclear ambitions never went away. Then came 2015. President Barack Obama negotiated the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, which was supposed to ease tensions. Iran agreed to limit its nuclear program in exchange for sanction relief. It was the most optimistic moment in U.S.-Iran relations in decades. And then, in 2018, President Donald Trump walked away from it. He called it the worst deal in history. He reimposed sanctions. And Iran, in retaliation, began slowly but systematically breaking every limit the nuclear deal had placed on them. The spiral downward had begun again. January 3rd, 2020, Baghdad International Airport, Iraq. It's just past midnight. A convoy of vehicles is moving slowly through the airport roads. Inside one of those vehicles is a man named Qasem Soleimani. To most Americans in 2020, that name meant nothing. But in the Middle East, in Iran, and in military intelligence circles across the world, Qasem Soleimani was one of the most powerful men alive. He was the commander of Iran's Quds Force, the elite foreign operations unit of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Think of him as Iran's most powerful general, spy chief, and strategic mastermind, all wrapped into one. For decades, Soleimani had orchestrated Iran's influence across the entire Middle East. He built up Hezbollah in Lebanon. He organized Shia militias in Iraq. He supported the Assad government in Syria. He extended Iran's reach into Yemen. The United States blamed him for the deaths of hundreds of American soldiers through the proxy forces he commanded. And on January 3rd, 2020, President Donald Trump ordered him killed. A U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone fired missiles at his convoy. Qasem Soleimani was killed instantly. The world held its breath. Iran declared 3 days of national mourning. Millions poured into the streets of Tehran, not in protest, but in grief and in fury. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, stood before the nation with tears in his eyes, something the Iranian people had almost never seen. And he made a promise. Harsh retaliation awaits the criminals who have his blood on their hands. Days later, Iran fired over a dozen ballistic missiles at 2 American military bases in Iraq. Over 100 American soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries. And then, nothing more happened. Trump didn't strike back. Iran had signaled it wanted de-escalation. The world exhaled. But the fuse had been lit. The assassination of Soleimani didn't end the conflict. It simply changed the rules. From that point forward, Iran accelerated its nuclear program at a pace that alarmed every intelligence agency in the Western world. Their uranium enrichment went from 3% to 20% to 60%, and then further. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, kept warning that Iran was weeks, maybe months, away from having enough enriched uranium for a nuclear weapon. And the United States kept watching, calculating, waiting. Every war in history has 2 causes. There's the immediate cause, the thing that happened on one specific day that made someone fire the first shot. And then there's the real cause, the decades of tension, mistrust, and accumulated grievances that made that one moment impossible to walk back from. You've already heard the real causes. Now let's talk about what finally lit the match. Tensions between Iran and the United States had been building at an extraordinary pace. Iran's nuclear program had crossed threshold after threshold. Their proxy forces had become bolder and more aggressive, and American patience, regardless of which administration was in power, was running out. The trigger came from multiple directions at once. First, Iran's nuclear program had reached a level that U.S. and Israeli intelligence could no longer ignore. Multiple credible reports confirmed that Iran was not just enriching uranium, they were working on weaponization, on fitting that enriched material into a warhead. This was the red line. This was the thing that both the United States and Israel had said for years they would not allow. Second, Iranian-backed forces had carried out an attack that killed American service members. Not just wounded, killed. When American soldiers die, the political calculation in Washington changes completely. Suddenly, every option that seemed too aggressive last week is back on the table. Third, an intelligence report surfaced suggesting that Iran was preparing a major coordinated strike. Not just rockets from Yemen or drones from Iraq, a genuine, large-scale military operation involving Iranian military assets directly. The National Security Council convened an emergency meeting. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs presented the president with a set of options. Option A, targeted strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Option B, broader military action including Iran's military command structure. Option C, a full naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Option D, diplomatic back channels combined with a visible show of force. Now let me stop and explain something because this is crucial. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow passage of water. At its narrowest point, it's only 21 miles wide, that sits between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula. And through this tiny strip of ocean passes approximately 20% of all the world's oil supply. Every day, roughly 21 million barrels of oil flow through this strait. If Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, or even threatens to close it, the entire global economy shudders. Gas prices skyrocket overnight. Supply chains collapse. Countries that depend on Middle Eastern oil, Japan, South Korea, India, much of Europe, are immediately affected. Iran knows this. They have known this for decades. The Strait of Hormuz is their most powerful weapon that isn't a weapon at all. And now, according to intelligence sources, Iran was moving military assets, fast attack boats, anti-ship missile systems, submarines, into positions that would give them immediate control over the strait. This was not a drill. This was not a bluff. The United States had 48 hours, maybe less, to decide what to do. The clock was ticking. Hour zero. The decision has been made at the highest levels. The United States is moving. 2 U.S. aircraft carrier strike groups, the USS Gerald R. Ford and the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, along with their escort ships, are ordered to move to combat-ready positions in the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea. On paper, this is called a show of force. In reality, everyone, from the Iranian military command in Tehran to the defense ministries in Moscow and Beijing, knows exactly what this means. This is not a show. This is preparation. At the same time, U.S. Air Force B-52 bombers and B-2 stealth bombers are repositioned to bases within striking range of Iran. Their payloads include bunker-busting bombs, specifically designed to penetrate deep underground facilities, the kind Iran uses to hide its nuclear program. Meanwhile, on the diplomatic front, Washington is burning the phones. The Secretary of State is personally calling counterparts in the UK, France, Germany, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Japan. The message is simple. We may be taking action. We want your support, or at least your understanding. The responses are mixed. Israel, immediately and enthusiastically supportive. Saudi Arabia, quietly supportive but nervous. European allies, deeply alarmed, urging restraint. At the United Nations, an Emergency Security Council session is convened. Russia and China, both permanent members with veto power, immediately oppose any military action. But here's the thing about the UN Security Council. It can issue statements, it can pass resolutions, but it cannot stop what's already in motion. In Tehran, the Iranian military is not sitting still. The IRGC is on full alert. Iran's air defense systems are activated. Surface-to-air missile batteries are brought online. Iranian submarines slip quietly beneath the waves of the Persian Gulf. Iran's proxy forces in the region receive a message: stand by. And then, at hour 6, something happens that nobody expected. Iran makes a move. A single Iranian fast attack boat approaches a U.S. Navy destroyer, the USS Gravely, in the Persian Gulf. It comes within 500 meters. The USS Gravely issues warnings. The Iranian boat does not respond. For 3 minutes, 3 of the longest minutes in recent military history, the commanders on both sides hold their breath. Then the Iranian boat turns and moves away. Was it a test? A provocation? A communication? Or just aggressive posturing by a local commander acting without orders? Nobody knew then, and the uncertainty itself was terrifying. Because at hour 8, the United States receives intelligence, credible, multi-sourced intelligence, that Iran is preparing a ballistic missile launch. The target? American military bases in the region. This is the moment. This is where the 48-hour clock truly begins. Because if Iran fires those missiles and American soldiers die, the President of the United States will have no choice. The American public, the Congress, the military, everyone will demand a response. The National Security Advisor picks up the phone and calls the President. The words spoken in that room over the next 4 hours would determine whether the world stayed at peace. Hour 12. The news is out. Not the classified intelligence briefings, not the secret conversations between heads of state, but the visible signs, the aircraft carrier movements, the B-52 repositioning, the emergency UN Security Council session. These things cannot be hidden. And the world's media is already connecting the dots. Let's talk about what this moment does to the world economy, because this is something most news coverage skips over, and it matters enormously. The second the markets open and see carrier groups moving toward Iran, the reaction is instant and brutal. Oil prices, which had been around $85 a barrel, jumped to over 100 in hours. By the end of the first trading day, they're approaching 110. American gas prices begin climbing overnight. Airline stocks collapse. Shipping companies begin rerouting vessels away from the Persian Gulf, adding days and thousands of miles to their journeys. The Dow Jones drops over 1,200 points in a single session. Markets in Tokyo, London, Frankfurt, Mumbai all feel it. This is the thing about a potential war with Iran that people outside the financial world don't fully appreciate. Iran doesn't need to fire a single missile to damage the global economy. The threat of closing the Strait of Hormuz is enough. At hour 14, something extraordinary happens. A back-channel communication comes through, not through official diplomatic channels, but through an intermediary. The intermediary is Qatar. Qatar has an unusual position in Middle Eastern geopolitics. They maintain relations with both the United States, they host the largest U.S. military base in the region, Al Udeid Air Base, and with Iran, with whom they share a massive natural gas field. Qatar is, in essence, one of the only countries on Earth that both Washington and Tehran will actually listen to. And the Qatari foreign minister, in a desperate attempt to prevent catastrophe, has been working the phones for 24 hours straight. The message from Tehran, delivered through Doha to Washington, is this: we are prepared to negotiate, but if there is any military strike on Iranian soil, all bets are off, and we will close the strait. This is what diplomats call a conditional statement, and it contains both an opening, we are prepared to negotiate, and a threat. The question is, which part does Washington focus on? Inside the Situation Room, the debate is fierce. The Secretary of Defense argues that the military option must remain on the table. The Secretary of State argues that the Qatari channel is real and should be explored. The CIA director presents the latest intelligence. Iran's missile launch preparations continue. They are not standing down. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs lays out the military assessment with cold precision. If Iran fires first and we strike back, we will degrade 70 to 80% of their military capacity within the first 72 hours. But they will close the strait. They will activate Hezbollah. They will hit Israel. This becomes a regional war, possibly a global one. If we strike first, preemptively, we have the element of surprise, but we lose the moral argument. We lose our allies, and Iran will still retaliate. The president listens, and then asks the one question that cuts to the core of everything. Is there any scenario where we do what we need to do and this doesn't become a world war? The room goes quiet. Hour 18. The intelligence assessment upgrades. Iran's missile launch is now assessed as highly likely within 6 to 12 hours. The window for diplomacy, if it exists at all, is closing fast. At this point, Israel enters the picture more directly. Israel is not just a bystander in this crisis. Israel is, in many ways, the reason this crisis exists at all. Iran's government has for decades called for the destruction of Israel. This is not an exaggeration. This is official Iranian state policy. Iranian military hardware, missiles, drones, have been used directly against Israeli territory. And for years, Israeli intelligence has been conducting a covert war against Iran's nuclear program. Sabotage, cyber attacks, assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists. The Israeli Prime Minister calls the American president directly. The conversation is urgent and direct. Israel cannot wait indefinitely. Iran's nuclear program is an existential threat. Every month that passes brings Iran closer to a deliverable nuclear warhead. The American president asks for 12 more hours on the diplomatic track. Israel's military is now on its highest alert level, a level not reached since the Yom Kippur War of 1973. Hour 22. The first sign that something may actually be changing comes from an unexpected source. Iranian state media, which typically broadcasts revolutionary anthems and government propaganda, suddenly goes unusually quiet on military matters. A small detail, easy to miss, but intelligence analysts notice it immediately. When a regime that loves to broadcast its military strength suddenly goes quiet, it means one of two things. Either they are about to do something and they don't want the world to see it coming, or someone inside the regime is arguing for restraint. And at hour 23, the Qatari channel delivers a new message. Iran wants a direct call. Not through intermediaries, not through the UN. A direct, back-channel communication between senior Iranian and American officials within 30 minutes. Hour 24. This is the exact midpoint of our 48-hour crisis. And right now, in a secure communications facility, something is about to happen that almost never happens in the history of U.S.-Iran relations. American and Iranian officials, senior officials, are about to speak directly. This phone call is happening with American bombers in the air, Iranian missiles on their launchers, and the entire world watching. The Americans put forward a series of demands. 1. Iran must stand down its missile launch preparations immediately. Verifiable within the hour. 2. Iran must agree to an emergency IAEA inspection of its most sensitive nuclear facilities. 3. Iran must signal publicly that it is willing to return to nuclear negotiations. In exchange, the Americans offer a freeze on additional military deployments to the region, a commitment not to initiate military action for a defined period, and the removal of a specific set of economic sanctions targeting Iranian oil exports. The Iranian side listens. There is silence on the line for a long moment, and then Iran's representative speaks. We did not start this crisis. We responded to yours. Every step we have taken has been a response to American aggression. The abandonment of the nuclear deal, the assassination of General Soleimani, the constant sanctions that starve our people. The American official responds, "We understand your perspective, but we are not here to relitigate the past. We are here because both of our countries are standing at the edge of something neither of us can control once it begins." The Iranian official responds, "Then perhaps America should step back from the edge first." The American official says, "That's a conversation we can have, but not with missiles on their launchers." The call lasts 47 minutes. At the end of it, no agreement has been reached, no announcement is made, but the Iranian missiles do not launch. Hour 28. The world is still on edge, but both sides are still talking. The UN Secretary General issues a personal statement calling for immediate, unconditional de-escalation. The Pope issues a statement from Vatican City calling for peace. In Washington, Congress is being briefed in closed sessions. The Gang of Eight sit in a secure room in the Capitol and receive the full picture. Their reactions are divided. Some demand immediate military action. Others argue desperately for diplomacy. And some simply look at the intelligence being presented to them and say nothing, because what they are being told is more alarming than anything they had publicly imagined. Hour 30. A crisis within the crisis. An Iranian drone, one of the fast, armed drones that Iran has used extensively in the region, approaches a U.S. naval vessel at high speed. Standard procedure is to issue multiple warnings, attempt radio contact, and, if the drone continues on an attack course, shoot it down. The drone does not respond to warnings. It is shot down. Under normal circumstances, this is an incident, unpleasant but manageable. But these are not normal circumstances. In Tehran, the news of the drone being shot down hits the IRGC command like a match dropped in a room full of gasoline. Within the IRGC, there are factions. There are those who want to use this incident as justification to launch, to say America has fired the first shot, to tell the supreme leader that the time for restraint is over. And there are others, older, more cautious, who recognize that this drone incident is exactly the kind of miscommunication that starts wars neither side actually wants. Whatever happens in the next few hours will be the supreme leader's decision, and the world has no idea which way it will go. Hour 36. We are in the final stretch, and this is the moment that historians will look at and call it the point of no return. The American aircraft carriers are now in firing range. The B-2 stealth bombers, invisible to radar, are already airborne and positioned. Pentagon planners have a detailed strike package ready, over 100 targets across Iran, including nuclear facilities, air defense systems, IRGC command centers, and ballistic missile storage sites. All that is needed is the order. One phone call, one two-letter command, one authorization code, and the world changes forever. This is the weight of the presidency, the weight that every commander-in-chief eventually faces. You are the most powerful person on earth, and you are standing at a decision that will define your legacy, the safety of your nation, and the direction of human history. Do you strike first, or do you wait? And in Tehran, the same weight sits on different shoulders. The Islamic Republic was built on resistance to America. The founding ideology demands it. But a full-scale war with the United States, with American carrier groups, stealth bombers, and the most sophisticated military in human history is not something Iran can survive conventionally. They know this. Hour 38. Something shifts. The intelligence reports from multiple sources begin to converge on a single assessment. Iran is pulling back from the immediate launch window. Why? The analysts debate it furiously. Some believe it's the back-channel communication working. Others believe it's internal Iranian politics. The moderate factions have, at least temporarily, gained the upper hand over the hardliners. And then there's a third theory. Iran is pulling back not because they want peace, but because they want the world to think they want peace. They are watching America's next move. In geopolitics, sometimes a retreat is just repositioning. Hour 40. The Qatari foreign minister flies to Washington, in person. He carries with him a formal, written message from senior Iranian leadership. Iran is willing to halt all uranium enrichment above 60% for a period of 60 days. Iran is willing to allow IAEA inspectors access to 2 previously restricted sites. Iran demands the removal of specific sanctions targeting its oil sector. Iran demands that the United States publicly commit to not seeking regime change in Iran. It is not a complete solution. It is not a peace treaty. It is not even a formal agreement. But it is something. It is the first concrete offer to de-escalate that has come directly from Iranian leadership in years. 6, 42. The American response to Iran's offer is being debated at the highest levels. The hawks argue this is exactly what Iran does. They offer just enough to make you back down. Then they continue their program. You give them time, they use the time. The doves argue this is a real opening. Take it. A 60-day freeze is a 60-day window. That's 60 days where nuclear scientists aren't working. That's 60 days where American soldiers aren't dying. And somewhere in between these two camps is the truth that all complex geopolitical situations eventually arrive at. There are no good options, only less terrible ones. Hour 44. The president makes his decision. America will not strike first. But the carriers stay where they are. The bombers remain ready. The posture does not change. The United States will respond to Iran's offer with a counterproposal through the Qatari channel. But publicly, they will say almost nothing. They will not announce a diplomatic breakthrough. They will not claim victory. Because claiming victory would be read in Iran as humiliation. And a humiliated Iran is an Iran that needs to prove something. Hour 46. Iran receives the American counterproposal. And this is where something remarkable happens. The supreme leader, who has spent 45 years defining himself and his revolution against America, who has called the United States the Great Satan, who has built his entire political identity on resistance, does not reject it outright. He sends it to his National Security Council for review. That's it. No dramatic announcement, no press conference, no revolutionary declaration. He just sends it to committee. In any other context, that would be bureaucratic inaction. But in the context of a nuclear standoff, with American stealth bombers in the air and Iranian ballistic missiles on their launchers, sending something to committee is the most peaceful act imaginable. Hour 47. Iranian military forces begin a slow, gradual stand-down. Not complete, not announced, but visible to satellite intelligence. The missiles are moved back from forward positions. The fast attack boats return to port. Hour 48. A joint statement is issued, not by the United States or Iran, but by Qatar, with the UN Secretary General's endorsement. The statement says only this: all parties have agreed to a temporary de-escalation of military postures and have committed to continuing dialogue through designated channels over the next 30 days. 27 words. 27 words that may have prevented World War III. The carriers remain in the Gulf. The bombers remain ready. Iran's missiles remain in their silos. Nothing is resolved. The nuclear program has not been stopped. The proxy wars continue. The sanctions remain. The fundamental hostility between Washington and Tehran, forged over 45 years, has not disappeared. But the guns have fallen silent, for now. So what does all of this mean? What do we take from 48 hours that shook the world to its core? Let me give you 5 things to understand. 5 conclusions that I think are unavoidable. 1. The crisis is not over. It's paused. A 30-day diplomatic window is not a peace treaty. The fundamental issues, Iran's nuclear program, American sanctions, proxy wars across the Middle East, none of these have been resolved. Everything that caused this 48-hour crisis still exists. The next spark could reignite everything. 2. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most dangerous choke point. If you didn't understand before why a body of water 21 miles wide at its narrowest point matters to every human being on this planet, you understand now. Global energy, global trade, and global stability all flow through that strait. And Iran controls the northern shore. 3. Proxy warfare is now the defining feature of modern conflict. Iran doesn't need to fight America directly. They never planned to. Through Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iraqi militias, and other networks, they can bleed America and America's allies without ever formally declaring war. 4. Nuclear weapons change everything. The reason this crisis was so dangerous is the nuclear dimension. A conventional war between Iran and the United States, while horrific, is ultimately containable. A war that involves nuclear weapons, or a war triggered by the fear that Iran is about to have nuclear weapons, is not. 5. Diplomacy is not weakness. It is the hardest thing. The easiest thing in that Oval Office would have been to strike. But the hardest thing, the thing that requires more courage, more intelligence, more strategic patience, is to find a way to achieve your goals without starting a war that can't be stopped. War is easy to start. It is almost impossible to control once it begins. So where do we go from here? The 30-day diplomatic window is now open. But what happens inside it will determine whether this crisis becomes history or becomes a prelude. Iran's nuclear program will not stop on its own. Even if Iran agrees to a temporary freeze, the knowledge, the centrifuges, the scientists, these don't disappear. A freeze is not dismantlement. And for America and Israel, anything short of a credible, verifiable halt to weaponization is insufficient. The economic dimension cannot be ignored. Iran's population, 85 million people, has suffered tremendously under decades of sanctions. Their currency has collapsed. Unemployment is high. Food prices are crushing ordinary families. Any diplomatic solution that doesn't address Iranian economic suffering will not survive politically inside Iran. The Iranian government needs to show its people that talking to America produces results. Not the government, not the IRGC, but regular people in markets, schools, hospitals. And this is the humanitarian reality that often gets lost in the geopolitical analysis. The Iranian people are not their government. The majority of Iranians, especially young Iranians, do not want this confrontation. They want normal lives. They want access to the global economy. They want a future that isn't defined by endless conflict. The tragedy of the U.S.-Iran conflict is that it punishes the people of both nations, and particularly the Iranian people, for decisions made by governments they didn't choose and cannot easily change. The road forward, if it exists at all, runs through several steps. First, a verifiable, monitored halt to uranium enrichment above civilian levels. Not a promise, not a pledge, an actual IAEA verified halt. Second, a phased, reciprocal easing of sanctions tied directly to verified Iranian compliance. Third, a broader regional security framework that addresses Iran's legitimate security concerns, particularly the presence of American military forces throughout the region, without giving Iran a veto over American foreign policy. Fourth, eventually and most difficult of all, a normalization framework. An acknowledgement on both sides that the 45-year war of ideology has not served either nation, and that a different relationship is possible. Is this realistic? Honestly, not easily, not quickly, not without setbacks. But look at where we were 48 hours ago. We were standing at the edge of World War III, and we stepped back. That means something. That means the possibility, fragile, contested, endangered, of a different future still exists. 48 hours. That's how long we stood at the absolute edge. Not because of some abstract geopolitical theory, not because of something happening in a world far removed from our daily lives, but because of decisions made by human beings sitting in rooms under unimaginable pressure with the weight of millions of lives in their hands. Some of those decisions were brave, some were reckless, some were desperate, some were brilliant. But in the end, in these 48 hours, the world chose, however imperfectly, however temporarily, to step back from the abyss. This story is not over. The Iran-USA conflict will continue. It will escalate and de-escalate, threaten and retreat, cycle through crisis after crisis. The nuclear question has not been answered. The proxy wars have not ended. The mistrust that runs 45 years deep has not dissolved. But tonight, as of this moment, the missiles haven't flown. The bombs haven't dropped. The strait is still open. The world is still in one piece. And that, as inadequate and impermanent as it feels, is worth something. If this video helped you understand something that the headlines couldn't, if it gave you context, depth, or just a clearer picture of one of the most dangerous situations on Earth right now, then please share it. Not because I need the views, although I definitely appreciate them, but because this is the kind of thing that people need to understand. The world is not a safe, distant place we watch on screens. It's a place we all live in. And what happens in the Persian Gulf affects what you pay at the gas pump, what your country decides to do with its military, and what kind of world your children will grow up in. Stay informed, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one. The measure of civilization is not what we are willing to destroy, it's what we are willing to build.